Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello. Today we are going to talk about how to stop your partner, your husband, from controlling you. So a handful of years ago, I was working with a few clients who were struggling with what really came down to kind of being controlled by their partner. And they really weren't feeling obviously very good with that dynamic. Like it just didn't feel like they were, on the same level as their partner, like that their partner was respecting them and valuing them. And they sort of didn't feel like equals in the relationship. And obviously that isn't what most of us are going for in our romantic committed relationships, right? So my clients were doing some good work on themselves around this, but hadn't yet, I was noticing that there wasn't as much progress on their partner, stopping his attempts at controlling them as they would have liked. And so I was thinking about, well, how can I help them, speed this process up so they don't sit in this relationship where they're being controlled, right? And around the same time, my mother-in-law was taking care of my, I think then 3 or 4-year-old son fairly regularly. And he was at the age where he was being pretty bossy and wanting things to, wanting to do the things that he wanted to do, totally a typical child, right? But my mother-in-law one morning, she said to me, I guess I'm just going to have to tell him I don't want to role play anymore. And I was like, that is so funny. It kind of struck me as oh, you haven't done that already? Because she basically had been spending many days pretending to be a dinosaur or a jaguar or whatever my son wanted her to be, days, right? Not just an hour or half an hour or 10 minutes here and there, which was kind of the way I would do it. And she was tired of it. She didn't want to keep doing it, but she had been having trouble saying no to him and continued to let him kind of be the boss. Right? And so it really got me thinking, how is it that I don't let myself get bossed around in my life? By my kids, by my husband, by anyone. Okay? And it was kind of a light bulb moment for me because I was well, I just wouldn't let that happen. Right? And to me, it feels so simple now. It's as simple as saying, no, I'm not going to do that. Right? But thinking about it, I thought back on my history and my past, and that it hadn't always been so easy to not let myself be controlled by other people. There was a lot of inner work that I actually had to do to be able to be someone who didn't let other people control her, right? Without guilt. I could, it's easy for me to be not let other people control me at this point without guilt, with just feeling totally fine about it. So I want to share about that today with you so you can do the same. So it's especially for those of you who do have a partner who can tend towards being controlling. It can be in sort of smaller ways that bother you, or sometimes we end up with partners who are quite controlling. And I think this is fairly common for highly sensitive people to have this kind of somewhat to very controlling partner. And there's a lot of reasons for this. Really, a lot of it's because we can be, as highly sensitive people, quite oriented towards pleasing others, right? For my mother-in-law, she just wanted to please her grandson by doing what he wanted her to do for hours at a time. But after a while, she started to feel resentful, right? Not so thrilled with it, right? So yeah, as highly sensitive people, we do like to please others. We can be oriented towards that for positive reasons and for some less healthy reasons, which I can share in a little bit. And we also really don't love ruffling other people's feathers, right? We don't love being around people who are upset, right? And so it can be pretty easy to like not want to go against what other people want so as not to upset them, right? And I think also not just highly sensitive people, but many people really buy into this idea that we need to make our partner happy to be a good partner, right? And if we're not making him happy, we aren't being a good partner. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like one of those like the messaging that we receive from the world around us. It's one of those ideas that so many of us subscribe to. And so when we do things that don't please our partner, that do upset him or that don't make him happy, like say no to something that he wants us to do or doing something in the way he wants us to, we might end up feeling guilty and ashamed, right? And so we might just keep doing what he wants. We might let him keep bossing us around, right? And so, yeah, we're going to be, if any of that's going on for us, we're going to be more willing to do what he wants and actually kind of override what we ourselves wants, right? We're going to keep doing things he tells us in little or big ways and overriding our own true desires. And that is not going to lead to what feels like a great, loving, respectful dynamic between you. So an example from actually one of the clients I was working with at that time, she, and her partner was really quite controlling. And she had been like baking bread or something one day. And she was just like in the middle of doing the recipe, following the recipe. And he like came in and was like, hey, don't measure it that way. And she was like, okay, how do you want me to do it? Right. And to her, it probably felt easier to just ask him how he wanted to do it his way, right? But in the long run, kind of catering to what he wants like that isn't easier, right? Because what it does when we're so invested in pleasing, when we want to do it his way, because it feels easier, when we don't want to ruffle the feathers, right? It isn't easier because it sets up an unspoken agreement between the both of you, right? It creates a dynamic that keeps him being the one who gets to be in charge and you kind of being like, oh yeah, okay, whatever you want. Like really like letting him be the controller and you just kind of obliging, while under the surface, you feel resentful and disregarded and not respected and even incapable and less confident even over time in yourself and your skills, right? And certainly it feels like you're not important and not valued and looked down on, right? I know all of you want to feel positively regarded, like respected. You want to be seen as a capable human being by your partner, right? You don't want him to be looking down on you. You want him to be looking at you with like wonder and love and respect and like seeing how amazing you are, right? So really, when we do this kind of thing, like, oh, whatever you want, right? Or even if you don't say those words, but that's kind of like the energy you show up with, like this client, like, oh, okay, how do you want me to measure it, right? Like, when we do that regularly, this is how we become complicit in this dynamic, right? Of the controller and the controlled. Now, I really want you to hear me. You're not, if this is you in any way, shape, or form, like it's not that you are making, I'm not saying you're making your husband or your partner be controlling, right? Of course not. That comes from him and all the stuff that's going on in him. But how we behave will encourage his controlling side to come out and flourish or to kind of shrivel up and and like shrivel away, right? Shrivel up and die, right? And of course, it's totally fine occasionally to be like, if he's so important to him, like how the bread is baked, like it's fine to like go along with his ways sometimes or do the things he wants, of course. But if he's always feeling like the boss and you're always following his orders, or even just a large amount of the time, like if you're always doing that to prevent him from getting upset or just to please him, you're going to be continuing to keep this kind of dynamic up. And again, you're going to feel resentful, not seen as competent and capable in his eyes, and really not have that relationship that you feel like loving, respected, valued equals, right? So I want to talk a little bit more about like how, what happens in us that allows this dynamic to kind of flourish a little bit more than we'd like it to. So some more of the things that can happen from our side is that we might somewhere in our brain think that he's more, that he's smarter, more capable, right? More important, right? Or we don't see ourselves as very capable. Right? Just having that kind of self-concept or this concept of him as being more like almost like that comparison, like, oh, he's the smarter one, he's the more capable one, whatever, right? Like that's going to be a way that we contribute to this controlled and controller dynamic. And, a lot of that's sort of related to, it comes from our way of thinking, right? When we kind of have this way of thinking about ourselves that generates a lot of self-doubt, right? Like maybe our way is the wrong way. Maybe the way we approach things is less good than the way he does, right? So when we're really doubting, or we tend towards doubting our own approach, our decisions, when we don't believe that our choices or desires are valid, right? We're questioning ourselves a lot, right? In all different ways. When we have a lot of self-doubt, in other words, not a lot of self-trust, we end up really abdicating our power to him, right? And then he kind of takes up that part of his dynamic, and he takes over, and he gets to be in control, the one with authority, right? So another thing that can happen there to set up this dynamic that from our side is that, again, I'm just going to re-highlight this one, when we're afraid of him feeling upset with us, right? And I've talked about this in a couple really specific episodes, and I call this when you're negative emotion averse, right? So there's a podcast called Negative Emotion Aversion, and there's also like how to not be upset when he's upset. Those are good ones that are related to this. You could go back and listen. But when you're really not comfortable with negative emotion, as so many of us highly sensitive people aren't, partially because we feel our emotions so much and, so deeply. And so it can be deeply uncomfortable, right, to be around other people when they're feeling negative emotion. So we can become kind of very averse to that or avoidant of it. But that can be a problem, because it means us being sort of more eager to not upset him and therefore do way more of what he wants us to, right? Sets up that dynamic for him to be the controller and us to be the controlled. And again, just to touch on this again, another aspect of this is when we're believing that being a good partner means not upsetting him. Like if you're believing that, you're not going to upset him. You're going to do everything you can to not upset him, because of course you want to be a good partner. You're a highly sensitive person, right? We are like so conscientious, and we do value our relationship so much. It matters to us to be a good partner, right? So if you have this belief that it means not upsetting him to be a good partner, you're like, yeah, that's not going to serve you so well in so many ways, but particularly when it comes to like letting him step into a place of like authority over you. Yeah. Okay. Another way that we are complicit in this dynamic is our tendency, and this is really related, if not the same thing, I want to pull it apart a little separately, is our tendency as highly sensitive people towards people pleasing, right? When we are very invested in our partner really approving of us, right? Thinking highly of us, right? When that's like so matters to us. And if he judges us, it's a problem. And if he has a negative opinion or thought about us, it's a problem, right? If that's going on for us, we're going to, again, do way more of what he wants and have trouble saying no and and like not really honor what we want, right? That's going to set us up to be very vulnerable to manipulation from him, right? To being controlled by him. So sort of to generalize out a bit, when what he thinks of you is what you make your choices around, and he tends to have a somewhat controlling personality, right? This will set up the dynamic of him being the controller and you being the controlled, right? So we want to be able to stop that from happening here. And I'm going to share a little bit about how in just a moment. So first I want to share, a little bit about my history. I used to be much more controllable, right? Like back in the day, I'd let others kind of convince me or manipulate me into things. And in those very first early relationships, dating relationships, like in high school, early high school, I remember it distinctly, right? And I hated it so much. I felt so not really respected or valued, right? And there was just I don't know, I felt manipulated, right? And it felt slimy. I felt slimy inside me when I was allowing that dynamic to go on. But since that time, I have never attracted a controlling partner, or I never chose to be in a relationship with someone who was controlling, right? So it was after the age of 18, after those very first earliest two high school, quote unquote boyfriends. Yeah. So how did that happen? How did and this is really what this whole thing with my mother-in-law got me thinking is how did I get there? How did I get here where being controlled is not a problem? And in this very simplest answer is this: I stopped being someone others could control. I became someone who was uncontrollable, right? I'm uncontrollable by others. And the bulk of this really for me was that I stopped attributing my feeling of being good enough, my knowing of me as a good enough human, to him feeling pleased with me, to my boy, to my guy feeling pleased with me, right? And I stopped being so concerned with how they reacted and responded to me. Now, this wasn't always easy, and I got better and better at it over time. But as I stepped more and more into it, I really no longer even attracted men who had controlling personalities. Pretty amazing. So if you already have a partner who can be controlling and you want to get back on kind of even ground and put an end to this controlling, to his controlling you, or you want to not attract a controlling partner ever again, right? And you want to be able to do all of this feeling guilt-free, right? You want to be able to do all this from a powerful place, from a loving place, instead of from an angry, freaking out, stop controlling me kind of place. Your work is to become uncontrollable yourself, to become someone who cannot be controlled by others. So how does one do that is the big question. So I'm going to share what it might actually look and sound like in action, in an interaction with your partner, to change this dynamic and to be someone who's not controllable. All right. So first thing that you can do, it would look like simply you not asking for permission to do the things you want to do. Right. It'd mean you being nope, I do what I do because I want to and I trust myself to do it, right? And you don't ask for his opinion on most things, right? Like when you're asking lots of permission to do things and asking a lot of his permission, it's really a way of like handing over like, hey, you know better than me, right? You're in charge here. So stop doing that. Okay? All right. And another thing that this can look like is matter-of-factly making statements, like saying things that show you're in charge of what you're doing, right? So like if your husband's like, hey, go do this thing for me, or hey, come to bed now. I mean, who knows? I don't know what kind of controlling things your partner is doing. Hopefully not so extreme. But if he is, you can simply say, nope, I can't, right? Like if you don't want to, just say, no, I can't. Totally matter-of-factly without any emotion. Yeah? So it's like, you're just strong and solid in yourself. Nope, I can't. And again, if, in that same kind of scenario, like if he's trying to get you to do something or like he's making suggestions to improve how you're doing something, like, I don't know, maybe what comes to mind is like digging in the garden and you're making your own like garden bed. And he's like, oh, don't do it like this. Just do it like this, right? You can just say, nope, no worries. I got this. Thanks, right? Simple. I got this. And then if he kind of comes back and insists, like, no, you got to do it this way, you can, and there's two options here. Like if you don't really care about the thing you're doing, like if you don't really care about doing the garden bed, if it was like his idea in the first place anyway, like you can totally hand it over to him and be like, yep, you can do it then. If you want it a certain way, then go ahead, you can do it. That's fine. And then leave and go do something you want to do. Okay. But if you do care about it, if it's like your garden bed and you have a vision for it, you can simply say, I'll do it my way. I don't know. I'll do it my way. You can even say, I'll do it my way. Thanks. Thanks for your input. Right? But don't leave room for his input. Right? Right? You say it from a place of like being in total control of yourself and the project, as if you are capable, as if you are sure in yourself. Right? Which of course, even if you don't feel like you totally are, you can grow to be. Right? So these are some of the actions you can take to stop him from always like wanting to step in and be in charge and control. But really what's interesting and important to note is that what actually enables you to say these things and show up this way with him in a way that really works, that's really effective actually, that will actually over time have him stopping to kind of want to take control all the time. It will have him trusting you more and even respecting you more and letting go of control more. What really enables you to do those things is the feeling that you're having, right? Our feelings are the source of our action taking. Yeah, like our actions naturally flow from our feeling state, right? And so the feeling state that you want here are like, I like to call it solid, but that's not really a feeling, right? Like it's like self-trusting, capable, confident, right? Secure in yourself, right? So in other words, it's really the opposite of self-doubting and insecure and self-questioning, right? Like I've been talking about earlier. Like you really got to feel like you know what's right for you. You're the authority on you and he's not the authority on you, right? Like trusting that you know what is right for you. Right, so there's that trust. Self-trusting is so big here. And really also feeling you're an equal to him, knowing yourself as a true equal. So here are 3 things that you can do to kind of get into that feeling space, to develop what I call the emotional fuel, right? So that it's easy for you to take those actions I just was talking about to sort of retrain him or train him to stop trying to control you. Yeah. All right. So the first thing, understand that the desire to control comes ultimately from fear, right? So his desire to kind of step in and be in charge, it can come from a fear of like so many things. And I don't even want to go into the details on that. But so his desire to control isn't because he's bad, right? But it's just because there's some sort of fear. He's got a human brain that might be sort of more fearful than some people's. And so the way to kind of help himself around that is to kind of control his environment, control you, control the way you do things, right? So I say this just so that you can have a little bit more understanding and take him down to this human level. Like he's on the same level as you. You're both humans. You both have fear. You both have insecurities, right? You both have human brains, so that you can feel more on that same level with him. And also to kind of remove some of the charge and frustration you might feel when he does try to control you, right? That will free you up to deal with it way more effectively and show up in that sort of calm, neutral, non-highly emotional place when he does try to control you, right? So it'll be easier just to say those words like, no, I got this, right? All right, the second thing, be willing to risk him getting upset, right? In order to be able to say no, or like, I got this, or any of that stuff, to break an old habit with him, an old dynamic, you need to be willing to not please him, to risk him getting upset, right? It really means dropping the need for him to feel pleased with you, right? Knowing like it's not your fault if he doesn't feel happy. He is allowed to be unhappy, and it doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't make you a bad partner if he's unhappy with something you choose or do, right? Right? Really, it makes you a good partner because you're creating a better dynamic with him, ultimately. Now, I highly recommend, again, going back and listening to, if this seems like really hard for you, go back and listen to the Stop Being Upset That He's Upset and Negative Emotion Aversion. Those are great podcasts that will go more in depth on this, being willing to allow him to feel, negative human emotion. The third thing that will provide you the emotional fuel to create the changes in this dynamic between you and your husband is to really develop your value, your sense of your valuableness as a human, like to know your value and worthiness as a partner, and that you don't have to like be proving it to him all the time by doing what he wants, right? To be a valuable human, right? Like knowing that you are a good human and you are a good partner, right? And that you are capable and smart and all those things. It's like really seeing your goodness even and owning it. And that's going to make it so much easier to be like, yeah, like this is my domain, right? You can't boss me around. I make my own choices. I trust my own choices. I know who I am. I am good. I am wise. I mean well. I am capable. I contribute, right? Like just knowing all of that goodness about yourself deeply. So landing in this emotional space, right? This emotional fuel is going to make it much more natural for you to break the dynamic and create a new dynamic with him that puts you on level ground and gets you so much more respect, right? So the advice here is that, you take these actions that I listed earlier, right? These words, saying these words that I suggested, and not asking permission and all of that. You go back and re-listen to that part and take notes on that part, right? And then implement them, do that every time or most of the time he attempts to step in and control you, right? You simply don't play the game anymore. You simply stop playing it. And it's kind of like training a dog, right? You have to repeat the thing over and over. And with your husband, it really is a sort of retraining him. It's breaking the old dynamic and creating a new one. And he's not necessarily going to be on board for changing this dynamic. He might not be at all. So it's your job, right? Just like of retraining him. So the thing is, he's not going to be able to keep up the dynamic when he realizes it's not working anymore, right? He might kind of have a bit of a fit. Like one of my clients, her husband really did not like her new self when she started showing up this way for a while. Like it was challenging for him to get the hang of this new dynamic. But ultimately what it leads to is more respect from his end and a totally new dynamic between you. And I do want to be very truthful here. When you start changing a dynamic like this, there is a possibility that he will not like it so much that he will decide to leave. Right? Because you are no longer playing by the rules of your relationship that were unconsciously agreed to by both of you. Right? So this is a risk that you need to be willing to take in order to gain this much better dynamic. Right? And like, don't you want to know the truth anyway about whether your man is in the relationship because he really loves and admires and respects you, or just to be in control of someone, right? The best news is that as you become someone who is uncontrollable, you actually gain a partner who doesn't need to control you and instead can just love you and respect you deeply and genuinely, right? Whether this man is the man you are currently with or the future partner you find. Yeah. Now, for most people, your partner's not going to want to leave you because you changed this dynamic, right? But for those of you who find out that that's your partner's really just in it to like control and get his way, then like better to know that now than like 10 years down the road, don't you think? So I want to kind of conclude all of this by saying that, when you are in this position of like letting yourself be controlled and kind of doing more of what he wants, letting yourself be bossed around, that's not actually like a loving relationship. That's not like you acting out of love. That's like you acting out of duty and fear, right? Now, I want you to know you can totally do things for him, but do them because you genuinely want to, not because you think you have to please him or to get approval from him or to not upset him, right? It is not your job to keep him happy, right? The truth is you can handle him being upset with you, right? You can handle him not feeling pleased with you. Really, your job is to let him have the job of keeping himself happy, just like your job is to keep yourself happy. Yeah? Then you can be on level ground, like equal partners, happy together, feeling like a team in life, right? When no one's in charge of anyone else except themselves. Yeah? Now, I know this actually is kind of advanced work, so I didn't talk about it at the earliest podcasts, right? Getting to a place where you can shift a dynamic like this requires some real inner shifts, right? As you can tell, I just listed them, but the work is real there, right? It requires some inner strength, some self-awareness, some really feeling and owning your power, really stepping into emotional agency, and truly coming from real, genuine love for yourself and love for the relationship that you want, like the vision that you want, and real, genuine love for him. But you are a strong, powerful, amazing woman. And you've got what it takes to develop all of that. So I want you to get to it. It's going to make a world of difference in the dynamic with your partner, and most especially in how you feel inside yourself. If you know that this is the realm that your work is, but it feels like a lot, and it would be so much easier and more possible for you if you just know that in your bones, to have some guidance and expert help with all of this, I invite you to seriously consider coaching with me. You really don't have to feel resentful and disrespected and like he looks down on you. You can completely feel on even, loving ground, and I am here to help you get there. To take the first step towards coaching with me, all you need to do is apply to schedule your free consult call. I will put the link in the show notes, or you can simply email me at hannah@lifeisworthloving.com. Here's to you becoming uncontrollable. Be oh so